And this is the last family that actually lived in the depot. The Hess family.
And they lived here to what year?
They lived up here until around 1960.
Till 1960. And that's when they shut down the depot.
That's when they shut down the depot, yep.
Wow.
And we have a nice brochure that she gave us. She came one time and gave us a talk on what it was like to grow up in the train depot and as a little girl.
Hey, you did so great. Oh no, she's not.
Well, this is a model of a Victorian home that would have been in Sanger about 100 years ago. Filled with cool stuff.
Yeah, I was saying it'd be fun to try to ride that bicycle.
Yeah, that bicycle was belonged to our president. Now, obviously, it was old even when he had it. And when we get the little kids in here, they say, well, how do you ride it? I said, well, it's got a little step in the back. You put your foot on the step, throw your leg over, and then you fall down. And then you get up and you try it again, you fall down, and then eventually you figure out how to balance yourself. Because we do have pictures of
people riding them.
Mr. Walton. Mr. Walton, it belonged to Mr. Walton. He was our past president, and that's his brother, and they're riding it around Sanger.
Oh.
Well, obviously another important part of Sanger's history was the logging operation that occurred up by Sequoia Lake. The logs were floated down the longest flume in America at one time over to by where the Chuck Wagon restaurant is here in Sanger. Annandale Street, there was a drying yard there, and that's where the flume came down from Sequoia Lake, 54 miles, and then it ended there at the drying yard. They did not send logs down the flume. Everything was rough sawn. They had lumber yards up in the mountains there, and they did all the sawing up there. One of the amazing stories is you look at a picture of a train like that and all those cars.
Uh-huh.
Well, that train pulled up in front of the Sanger Depot. It was disassembled, loaded onto horse-drawn wagons, and hauled up to Sequoia Lake.
Sequoia Lake, wow.
Amazing. And then towards the end, around the early 1900s, it was purchased by the Hume family. The logging operation was purchased by the Hume family. Very wealthy family. And when Hume came here, he looked and he says, well, I don't want no narrow gauge railroad, I want a standard gauge railroad. So he ordered a brand new engine, secondhand cars. They arrived in front of this depot. They were disassembled, loaded onto horse-drawn wagons, and hauled up to Hume Lake.
Wow.
In all the years the lumber yard operated, they never made a dime. They lost money every single year.
Huh.
And for some reason, I don't know why, they went up to cut down pine trees and whatnot. But for some reason, they branched out into cutting down redwood trees. And our redwood trees are called Sequoia gigantea. And they're super brittle, so when they cut them and they hit the ground, they shattered. Just a mess. Whereas the Sequoia sempervirens that grow along the coast, they're actually good for building material. But these trees, they weren't. But why did they
continue to cut them?
Because the amount of labor that it took to cut down one of those trees. But they did. And some of the lumber was salvaged, and when it arrived here, was loaded on the train, went up to San Francisco, and it was shipped all along the Pacific. Some of it even ended up in Australia.
Wow.
Amazing. Well, yeah, they had a big lumber operation up there.
Yeah, pretty incredible. Think about the manpower and what they did.
Yeah. Now you look at all these huge trellises. Okay. They say, well, why did they go through all the trouble of, they even used some Chinese laborers that had come in to work on the railroads, and they were used, part of the crew that built these gigantic trellises. And they said, well, why the heck did they do that? Well, the flume was built in 16-foot sections called a box. And for every 16 feet, they were allowed 1 inch of drop flume, and you couldn't float your boards down. So whenever, if you go along the Kings River, that's pretty rough country with all these gullies and ravines and everything. Well, they had no choice. They had to maintain that 1 inch of drop per 16 feet in order to keep water in the flume so that they could float the boards.
It's just amazing that they could be that accurate back then with the tools they had.
And they came close. I mean, obviously, sometimes it was 3 inches, 4 inches, half an inch. But they had to try to do as close to 1 inch of drop per 16 feet as they could to maintain the flow of water and to float the bundles of lumber. Now, the boards were not sent down as individual boards. They were all clamped together in bundles that thick. And then along the way, there were 10 flume houses where they had crews of men that maintained the flume all the way from Sequoia Lake all the way here to Sanger. And you can see there's a crew there working, looks like some bundles had come apart. And so they're out working on the flume there.
So that's just like a recovery, then trying to get them back together.
Yep. Now Hume Lake, it's hard to see here, but it has an arch dam. And engineers came from all over the world to look at that dam because it was built by a guy named Eastwood, and because it required very little material and yet it was very strong. So, and there's another arch dam, I believe, up on Florence Lake also.
Huh.
So a huge amount of work, and as I said, it operated from around 1900 until around 1914. 5 or 6 different owners, the last one being the Humes, and they never made a dime.
Never made a dime. Wow. A lot of work not to make any money.
It sure was. Well, here's a real nice diorama of what it looked like. It's not a perfect scale model, but you can see Sequoia Lake, Hume Lake, drawing lumber yard that they had up in the mountains. Sequoia Lake and Hume Lake were built for one reason and one reason only, to provide water for the flume. Now they're tourist attractions, but in those days it was strictly to provide water for the flume. And a couple of years ago, me and Mr. Marcantonio, we discovered where that bridge crossed the Kings River.
Oh, wow.
If people know where Big Creek enters Pine Flat Lake, you can still see the foundations. Now, when they tested the flume, the very first time when they put water in it, that bridge started rocking and rolling, and all the water came out of the flume. So they contacted a company up in San Francisco, and they said, can you build us a steel bridge in 30 days? If you can, you got the contract. And they said, we can do it. So they loaded a steel bridge onto a train. It arrived in front of this train depot. The bridge was loaded onto horse-drawn wagons, hauled up to Pine Flat Lake, and the wooden bridge was replaced with a steel bridge, and then the operation could operate. It worked. It was now successful. You could get wood all the way down here to Sanger.
Wow.
But the amount of labor and all is just amazing, amazing what they did.
I'm sure that steel bridge is riveted together, right?
Yeah, it must have been. I don't know how it was. The bridge itself now is gone. The only thing left are the foundations.
I know when I was a kid, when the lake would go dry, I'd go down there with my dad. We'd go down where the old jail foundation was, and
Yeah, they
some of
say
the old
it's an old
town.
jail. I've been there. I don't believe it was an old jail, but it's a
Foundation to something then.
foundation for something, that's for sure. A nice ranch there, and
Yep.
I took pictures of it, as a matter of fact, when they first announced it, because I couldn't believe it. I said, well, what?
With the walls, yeah.
Well, and not only that, why would you have a jail way out in the country, no town around it? The only thing there was the hotel.
The hotel right up above it,
And
yeah.
cowboys. That was it. And you're going to have a jail? I didn't believe it, but they say it was an old jail, so more power to them. But yeah, a lot of imagination and a lot of work. Just amazing. Any special questions about anything?
Well, I think you've covered it pretty good for me. I really appreciate you taking your time and explaining all this to us, and I'm hoping more people will come out here and take a visit and enjoy your museum here, because there is so much to learn. It is really incredible.
Yeah, that's what we hope too. Right now we're hosting all the third graders in Sanger. They're coming here, and we give them tours and a little bit of history, you know.
That's great. You got to keep history alive.
Yep.
Well, I do appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for coming, and spread the word.
Yep, we will.